Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says time for a Spawn Cities mission in India. This article speaks about massive explosive unplanned urbanization which has resulted in floods in Indian cities. This has caused destruction on the economic front and loss of lives as well. When you look at the past, we have several examples from Indian cities. This includes cities like Chennai, Gurugram, Mumbai, Delhi, and now it has hit Hyderabad as well. What are the contributing factors? What are the measures that have to be taken? Has been discussed on 15th of October 2020 under the first topic Hyderabad floods, urban flooding. Kindly look into it. One of the other contributing factors which has also resulted in flooding in Hyderabad is what is called as antiquated infrastructure. So what is this antiquated infrastructure? Whenever a city is born or a city is given birth to or there is a creation of a new city, what we have is the drainage system. When it comes to the drainage system in Hyderabad, it was created back in the year 1920s. So back then, when you look at the Hyderabad as a city, it was very small in nature. It had a very small infrastructure growth as well. So the drainage that was built for this particular city was also small. But what happens as we have growth in that particular city, there is expansion of the city as well. This also requires commensurate increase in the drainage system. But what is the major issue right now? The commensurate increase in the growth of the city has not been met with the development of drainage. So what is the major issue? The development of drainage initially took place back in the year 1920. We have expansion of the city right now. So ideally, there should have been a commensurate increase of the drainage system as well. Since we do not have the increase, this has also led to flooding in this particular region. This is one of the important factors when it comes to Hyderabad. But rest of the discussion about the contributing factors, you may have to look on to 15th of October 2020. Now what we have to focus is on measures to be taken, and one of the key measures that the government will have to take going forward with respect to Hyderabad and also with respect to all other cities is about wetlands management by involving the local communities. What are these wetlands? Let's say for example, when it comes to the urban areas, we have couple of lakes in urban areas, then there might be other rivers that might be flowing in this particular region. In all these cases, what we require is the participation of the local communities. Why? Because the local communities might be using these lakes or the river passing through the urban area for issues like farming, or they might also be using it for the livelihood provision like fishing as well. So what we require is the participation of all these local communities. Why does it become important for the participation of the local communities? Whenever there is a law that is passed by the government, it will be a top-down approach. So you will have the government, you will have the municipalities, or you will have couple of agencies which will pass the law. They might not have experience in that particular region, but the local communities will be living in this area for a long number of years. So they might have seen how the transition has taken place in this particular lake area or when it comes to the river as well. So what we require is that knowledge, that experience gained by the local communities to be taken into by the government. So participation of the local communities becomes very important. So what we will have is the bottom up approach rather than the top down approach. So when we have the local communities which are participating into it, they push all their experience into it, and this can also help in management of the wetlands is one of the important factors when it comes to the measures that the government have to take. Then we have an important concept introduced under this article, and that is what is called as spawn cities. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say you have a plain floor, you have spilled the water on it. So what do you usually do? Let's take a simple example. So you take the sponge, what it does, it absorbs all the water if there is a presence of spilling in that particular place. Imagine the same implemented on the normal roads. What do we currently have? When we look into the current city infrastructure, it is filled with thick concrete roads. We have cement roads. These roads will not allow the water to seep into it. So the resultant is there is increasing cases of flooding in all these areas. Because the city infrastructure is impermeable, it does not let water to seep into it. That is the major problem when it comes to the city infrastructure currently. So what is the impact here? Because it is not able to absorb the water, what we will have is increasing cases of flood. But there is a new concept that is designed, and that design is what is called as permeable roads or the Sponge City program. So what is this Sponge City program? Basically, this is one of the unique initiative where natural materials are embedded into the architecture, where they would be able to soak the rainwater instead of allowing it to flood that particular area. Because the earlier model is impermeable, we need a new model where we have new infrastructure that is developed, where roads become permeable, where water gets absorbed, gets seeped into that particular lane in that particular road, preventing this area of flood concentration. So the sponge cities absorb the rainwater where it is naturally filtered by the soil, and this can also be used in the near future as the groundwater, and this can be supplied as drinking water to the city people in that particular area. How do we put the sponge city into practice? What we require is new and updated technology. So this technology includes the porous materials. What we will require is the bioswales and the retention system, permeable material for the roads and the pavements, drainage systems which will allow the excessive storm water to seep into it, trickle into the ground as well. We have heard about the rainwater harvesting. Similar to rainwater harvesting, what we have also require is called as the green roofing, where water is absorbed and the same water can be utilized in the near future. Contiguous open green spaces, interconnected waterways, channels and ponds across the entire neighborhood is also the need of the hour when it comes to the sponge cities. How do we implement this program in India? According to the author, we have couple of yojanas and programs as of now. We have the Amrut Mission, which stands for the Atal Mission for the Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation. We have the Hriday Yojana, which stands for the National Heritage City Development and Augmentation Yojana, and the government Smart City Mission as well. So integrating the Sponge City Mission with all these existing programs will serve India going forward is what the author recommending. So what are the benefits of the smart city? Basically, whenever such a technology is implemented, this will help in reduction in the flood risk as well. So what exactly happens? Because the city now offers more permeable spaces for the natural retention and for the percolation of the water, this will offer better resilience as well as greater ability to deal with higher flood risk in that particular area. Moreover, this will also provide clean water for the drinking facilities that is present in that particular city as well. There are a couple of cities in India. Let's take the example of Bengaluru, or let's take the example of Chennai, where water has become deficient at times as well. In case we are able to effectively make use of this sponge city mission, the water percolation will also result in increasing cases of groundwater increase, and this can be used for drinking water purposes as well. And also remember, this will also provide the greener, the healthier and more enjoyable urban places. This is not all. There are challenges when it comes to the execution of this program. So what are the challenges when it comes to the present infrastructure? Let's say hypothetically, for bringing up to the road of about 1 kilometer, it might cost about, let's say, 50 lakhs. But if this sponge infrastructure has to come into picture, there has to be an updation of the new technology for permeable roads. This means that there is increasing cost factor that steps in. So the first major impediment for executing this particular program is about the cost factor, and this will also require the political will as well, which might be lacking in the near future when it comes to the political execution. And at the same time, there might also be an economic disaster as well. Let me give you an example. Let's say there is a tanker which is carrying an oil. All of a sudden, let's say this tanker spills over if this tank spills over, there is petrol or diesel in this tanker, because the roads are permeable, this immediately starts seeping into that particular area. So the problem is this could result in environmental catastrophe. It may mix with the groundwater as well, and cleaning them will become a major problem. And if it enters into the drinking water, this might also have some serious health repercussions as well. So what is the major problem? If there is a major vehicle accident which involves a tanker carrying fuel, that is petrol or diesel, in case it enters into the groundwater, it becomes catastrophic both for the health and also for filtering them. These are some of the challenges when it comes to its execution as well. So the author in this particular case says that whenever there is flooding that takes place in a particular area, there is blame game that initially starts off. Political parties blame each other, local authorities blame each other, organizations blame each other, and this heads up to the state departments, bureaucracy, so on and so forth. In order to avoid all the blame game, in order to reduce the economic losses and also the loss of lives, what we require is the implementation of this sponsity, says the author of this article. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. But for the rest of the analysis with respect to urban flooding, kindly look into our 15th October 2020 for the elaborate analysis. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about the withdrawal of the southwest monsoon, the arrival of the northeast monsoon, and some of the drawbacks when it comes to measuring and analyzing the northeast monsoon. First up, the southwest monsoon 2020 has officially come to an end as per the Indian Meteorological Department. Why? Because the Indian Meteorological Department currently says that all the winds that is required for the southwest monsoon has been withdrawn. So what we will have is the end of the southwest monsoon. The article further has gone on to mention what is called as the long period average. What is this long period average? Whenever we have to measure the economy in a country, what do we have? We have the GDP numbers. The GDP numbers is compared with the base year. That is how you would be able to understand whether there is a growth or not, or let's say there is inflation in the economy. How do we measure it? We again have a benchmark. Likewise, whether the rainfall is excessive, whether it is normal or it is deficient, what we require is one of the benchmark. That benchmark for which we are comparing is what is called as the long period average. As the very name denotes, it is an average that is considered for a long period, and that includes for about 50 years. Currently, we have the long period average that is considered for a 50-year period, and it is from 1951 up until 2000. And for the southwest monsoon, the long period average currently is about 89 centimeters. So kindly remember, this long period average is not the same for the southwest monsoon, and it is totally different for the northeast monsoon as well. On the basis of this long period average, the Indian Meteorological Department maintains about 5 rainfall distribution categories on all India scale. This includes normal or near normal, when percentage departure of actual rainfall is plus or minus 10% of LPA, that is between 96 to 104% of the LPA. Below normal, when the departure of actual rainfall is less than 10% of LPA, that is 90 to 96% of LPA. Above normal, when actual rainfall is 104 to 110% of LPA. Deficient, when departure of actual rainfall is less than 90% of the LPA, and it is called as excess rainfall when departure of actual rainfall is more than 110% of the LPA. Now what is that we have to understand? Since there is withdrawal of the southwest monsoon, what we will have is the arrival of the northeast monsoon. The Indian Meteorological Department recognizes October to December to be the time for the northeast monsoon. During this period, rainfall is experienced in number of states in India. This includes states like Tamil Nadu, this includes states like Andhra Pradesh, and in small pockets in Telangana and Karnataka as well. But major states which receive the rainfall from the northeast monsoon include Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. This is also having special bearing on Tamil Nadu. Why? Because more than 50% of the rainfall in the region of Tamil Nadu is contributed by the northeast monsoon. There are a couple of other regions in India. Let's take the example of the Gangetic Plain or a couple of other states in the northern part of India. They also receive rain during November and December. That is not due to the northeast monsoon. They are due to the western disturbances. So what are these western disturbances? They are nothing but the east flowing wind that originates from the Mediterranean Sea. The water and the moisture is collected from the Mediterranean Sea, and then this drops in the Gangetic Plains and in the northern states, and this causes rainfall in all these regions. So kindly remember, the rainfall from the northeast monsoon happens only in these pockets of areas, and if it is raining in Gangetic Plains or in the northern states, that is due to the western disturbances. So when it comes to the numbers, we have the northeast monsoon, which contributes about 10 to 12% of the monsoon for the entire India, and when it comes to the southwest monsoon, what we have is about 75% to 80%, which is contributed by the southwest monsoon. Now, what is the major concern? When we looked into the statistics, we did realize that southwest monsoon contributes 75 to 80% of the rainfall to India. Only 10 to 12% of the rainfall is from the northeast region. So because the number of states that are impacted is way too huge when it comes to the southwest monsoon, and it has limited scope when it comes to the number of states it impacts in the northeast monsoon, what we have is the research and development with respect to the theory, analogy, and the research with respect to the rainfall patterns is mostly restricted towards the southwest monsoon. The same amount of research is not present when it comes to the northeast monsoon as well. The northeast monsoon is harder to predict, and at the same time it is also governed by the climate dynamics of the Bay of Bengal, which itself is hard to predict. So what we require is more research and development when it comes to the understanding of the northeast monsoon. So what this article says is that scientists will have to put in more effort, design the research programs to better analyze the vagaries of the northeast monsoon, so that the states like Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh do not suffer because of lack of statistics and research when it comes to the northeast monsoon. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Indian Americans, the role and influence they play when it comes to the elections in the United States of America. Let's look at some of the statistics. The Indian American population is the second largest immigrant group in USA after the Mexicans. Indian Americans are mostly highly educated, racial or the ethnic groups in the United States of America, and as a result, the median annual household income for the Indian Americans in 2010 was $88,000, much higher than all Asian Americans and all US households, which was earning about $49,800. So what is that we have to understand? In spite of Indian Americans constituting less than 1% of the overall US population, more than 10% of the doctors in United States of America are the Indian American community. More than 5% of the scientists, engineers and IT professionals are the Indian Americans, and at the same time Indian Americans are also a relatively young population as well. So because they are able to make this impact in the elections in United States of America, both the major political parties in United States, the Democrats and Republicans, are trying to woo the Indian American citizens. So in this particular backdrop, what we have to understand is how do they influence the elections. It is important to note that all the earlier immigrants to the United States of America were busy in building their livelihoods. They were least interested in the politics. All they wanted was the economic security. But today's diaspora is playing an increasingly important role when it comes to the American politics, from the local politics to the state politics to the national politics as well. The number of Indian Americans in high political offices have been increasing consistently as well. Indian community members have also contested, they have campaigned, participated in the US electoral process. So basically, the Indian American community's attempt to influence this entire electoral process can be employed into two important strategies. One is what we call as the fundraising. The other is what we call as the special purpose group. What is this fundraising? Basically, when you look at the population, they are very less than 1% in the overall population of the United States of America. But what they are able to do is raise finances for both the political parties as well. So the communities come together, they raise the financial contributions both to the republics as well as for the democrats, and they also wield power in some of the traditional bastions like the Ivy League colleges, premier think tanks, and also the judicial system as well. Such is the case of control when it comes to the Indian American community. So what are they doing right now? They are able to get all the finances and are able to contribute both to the Republican Party and also for the Democratic Party as well. They have also created what is called as the special purpose groups. So what are these special purpose groups? Basically, the Indian Americans have established several advocacy organizations and political party committees on a wide range of issues as well. Let's take the example of US India Political Affairs Committee or the Indian American Forum for Political Education. So what is that they do? They work on advocating India's cause in United States of America. In case there are people who are wanting to vote for a political party and that political party is against India, they convince the people not to vote for that particular candidate if he has taken a stand against India or they are pro Pakistan as well. So all that they do, they advocate value system in the cause of India. That is what is called as the special purpose group as well. Apart from this, they also play a very important role when it comes to the registration efforts. Let's say for example, there is an Indian American, he is also a citizen of United States of America, he is a registered voter as well, but he is not going to vote in United States of America. So what do? They educate about the importance of voting, and they also make sure that such eligible Indian American voters actually go to the polling booth or they actually cast their vote when it comes to the elections. Now the question is, how is that this Indian American community has helped bridge the gap between India and United States of America? In case there is a negative perception about India, this has been changed into a positive perception by all the Indian Americans who are present in United States of America. There are a number of pro-Indian legislators as well. They have defeated bills and amendments that were deemed to be detrimental for India-US relationship as well. And at the same time, many of the Indian Americans also make regular visits to India. They also send remittances to India. In fact, United States of America is the second largest source of remittances to India after West Asia as well. So these are some of the contributions made by Indian American community to India indirectly as they stay in United States of America. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says import barriers will not be perpetual. We have something called as the Atmanirbhar Bharat. This is also called as the self-reliant India, where more focus is given to the local manufacturers, more focus is given to the local entrepreneurs over the imports that are made from couple of organizations located outside India or from other countries. So what is happening here? In order to promote the local entrepreneurs, in order to provide the local manufacturers some boost, the government is giving certain incentives. It is also providing some certain subsidies, and at the same time it is also putting barriers to other countries in the form of tariffs. So what the article currently says, that this tariff imposed by the government of India will only be temporary provision and will always come with what is called as the sunset clause. What is this sunset clause? Let me give you a simple example. Let's take there is a manufacturing company which is manufacturing mobile phones in India. As of now, we do not have any Indian owned manufacturing company. So tomorrow, let's say we need one of the Indian companies which has to compete at the global level. So what does the Indian government do? It imposes tariffs on, let's say, iPhone. So all those people who are planning to import iPhones or they are planning to get iPhones from other country, there will be a taxation of about 25%. So this taxation is only a temporary period. So what is this temporary period? After 1 year, the government need not have to come up with the changes, but this will immediately be removed after 1 year period. Usually, when it comes to the taxation, what you usually have is the government coming every now and then and brings changes to the tariff program. But when it comes to the sunset clause, after 1 year, or let's say the government has mentioned 6 months, or it has mentioned 3 months, or about 13 months or 15 months, automatically this tariff gets suspended, and that is what is called a sunset clause. A sunset clause or a sunset provision is basically a statute or a similar legislation which expires automatically without the interference of the government. So why is the government doing it? That is because they have to make sure that all the local entrepreneurs, local manufacturers are able to withstand the pressure from the outside enterprises, and at the same time our Indian products are also able to compete at the global level and is able to get profits. So the Niti Aayog vice chairman has clarified that India is not getting into the loop of the closed economy. Instead, what it is doing is allowing the Indian manufacturers to compete at the global level. And in case there are tariffs that are imposed on the foreign imports, or for example on a foreign company, it will always come with a sunset clause, which means the government need not have to interfere every now and then. It will come with a clause which will expire automatically after a considerable period of time. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Consider the following statements. Public Affairs Index is a data-driven platform to rank the state of India from the lens of governance. It was developed by Niti Aayog by collecting data from union government ministries and departments. Kerala ranked first in the large state category in terms of governance. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 1 and 3 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, this was not initiated by the Niti Aayog, but this was developed by the Public Affairs Center, which is a not-for-profit organization, which is a think tank situated in Bengaluru. They basically work at improving the quality of governance in India. The institute conducts research activities in major fields like public policy and participatory governance. So this index is based on secondary data that is collected from all the union government ministries as well as departments. This is also on the basis of the sustainable development confined by 3 pillars, which includes equity, growth as well as sustainability. This center has given ranking when it comes to the operations of governance. It includes Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. The first 4 ranks in the large state category. That means they have performed well. And then we have at the bottom Uttar Pradesh, Bihar and Odisha as well. Followed by this, when it comes to the small state categories, we have Goa, which is ranked first, followed by Meghalaya as well as Himachal Pradesh. When it comes to the worst performance in small states, what we have is Manipur, Delhi, Uttarakhand, which are present in the report. And when it comes to the union territories, we have Chandigarh, which has emerged as the top in the category of union territories, followed by Puducherry as well as Lakshadweep. Kindly remember all these important statistics because this can be very important from your preliminary examination point of view. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following statements about olive ridley turtle is or correct? The species is recognized as vulnerable by IUCN Red List. The coast of Orissa in India is the largest mass nesting site for olive ridley, followed by coast of Mexico and Costa Rica. They are carnivorous and feed mainly on jellyfish, shrimp, snails, crabs, mollusks and a variety of fish. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 1, 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following reports or indices is correctly matched? We have the World Happiness Report given by the United Nations, Press Freedom Index given by the Reporters Without Borders and Global Hunger Index report given by the World Health Organization. Which of them are correctly matched? The answer to this is 1, 2. Why? Because the Global Hunger Index is not given by the World Health Organization. Instead, it is released by the International Food Policy Research Institute based in Washington in association with Concern Worldwide of Ireland and World Hunger Life. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. ISRIM recently seen in news is part of which country? Is it Syria, Iran, Turkey or Iraq? The answer to this is Turkey. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, it is one of the important Turkish cities, that is Izmir, and there is another important island called as Island of Samos, which happens to be in the Greece as well. Why is this in picture? That is because earthquake has struck both these regions, that is Izmir, which happens to be the third largest city with the population of nearly 3 million, and Samos Island, which is a part of Greek island in the Eastern Aegean Sea. Kindly remember, when it comes to Turkey, Turkey is fundamentally vulnerable to all the earthquakes because of its geopolitical location. So what happens here? It lies between 2 important plates, and that includes the Eurasian plate as well as the African Arabian plate. So whenever these plates collide each other. This results in what is called as the earthquake. So the Arabian plate is slowly smashing into the European plate at a speed of less than 1 inch per year. These periodic movements happen along the two faults. One is what is called as the North Anatolian fault, the other is the East Anatolian fault. So because there is this hit that happens from the Arabian plate to the Eurasian plate, this has resulted in earthquake every now and then in Turkey. So kindly remember the maps as well. One includes Zamos, the other is Izmir. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to the Finance Commission. It is a quasi-judicial body. The chairman should be a person having experience in economics. Members are not eligible for reappointment. Which of the above statements are incorrect? Since it is asking for the incorrect statement, the answer to this is 2 and 3. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, it is a quasi-judicial body. They are eligible for reappointment and the person should have experience in public affairs and not economics. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to bio toilets used by the Indian Railways, consider the following statements. The decomposition of human waste in bio toilets is initiated by a fungal inoculum. Ammonia and water vapor are the only end products in this decomposition which are released into the atmosphere. Which of the statements given above is correct? The answer to this is neither 1 nor 2. Why? That is because the decomposition of human waste is not by the fungal inoculum but instead it is by bacteria, and at the same time this is not the ammonia which is the end product but instead it is the methane gas. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Properly implemented sponsity can reduce the frequency and severity of floods and improve water quality. Discuss. Explain how the Indian American community plays an increasingly important role in US elections. And before we end this session, we have a small announcement that tomorrow being Kannada Rajyotsava, the Byju's offices will remain closed and we will not have the Hindu analysis for tomorrow. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.